Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of the show Hazbin Hotel, which is produced by Amazon and A24 and created by Busy Pop. This is episode 3 of the first season, Scrambled Eggs. As I mentioned at the latter half of the last review, this is the episode where we're going to find a little bit more about the overlords. I mean, we were introduced to 3 of them last episode, now we get to see the rest of them, at least in part. Now, there are 2 plots when it comes to this one. First one is the overlord meeting, which ties into what we saw at the end of the first episode, and that is the angel being killed. And the other one is the hotel patrons going through trust exercises, and these 2 tie into one another with the second song, which is going to be Whatever It Takes, which I believe I mentioned at the end of the previous review is the song I kind of slept on. It's definitely one of my favorites of this season now. Now, episode starts a little bit after the previous episode. Serpentius is now the second patron of the hotel, along with Angel Dust, and things seem to be going like how you would expect. Then we see Serpentius get a delivery. He ordered some machine parts from Carmilla Carmine, one of the overlords who runs a weapon distribution business. This definitely would explain where he's getting all of his stuff, so I guess you could say that Carmilla and her whole enterprise is the acme to Serpentius's Wile E. Coyote, which that is a very interesting comparison, considering that from what we've seen, none of Serpentius's schemes ever work, so it's the same type of thing. Only difference is he actually does get something in the end, as we'll see, unlike Wile E. Hey, I say that because as I record this, his latest movie still is on the chopping block. Now, Charlie and everyone sees this and they really scold Serpentius like, no, you came here to redeem yourself. Do you want to redeem yourself? Yes, I do. You can't redeem yourself by creating weapons like that to use against the other patrons just because you think they're going to attack you. And Vaggie even brings up, and you can't have your egg boys here to do your evil bidding, as you put it. So you have to get rid of them. And of course Serpentius has a little manic episode. My egg boys, I can no longer have you. And they seem all nonchalant. So they give the eggs to Alistair to dispose of. And he already has an errand that day, so he's like, oh yeah, I'll dispose of them on my errand. So he takes the eggs out with him, and it turns out his errand that day is he's attending an overlord meeting, which, considering the news that Heaven had just sent down to Hell, it's not that out of the realm of possibility that they would have a meeting like this. Now, he initially tells the eggs to stand guard at the front door, but one of them sneaks in. And I love this as a way to introduce the names, like, we have names. Now, there's only 5 of them at this point, which makes sense considering in the pilot we saw a couple of them get scrambled. Now, there's a possibility they got repaired, but I didn't bother counting how many were in the pilot. So I'm going to assume that this is how many are left over following that. Now, that egg sticks close to Alistair during the meeting, and this is where we see a lot of the overlords. One thing I have not mentioned is that one of the original designs for the overlords got scrapped, and that was a red parrot. And of course that one got reused in Hell of a Boss in the form of Visago. But here the only overlords that really don't matter in the grand scheme of it when it comes to plot is the lizard looking one who gets 1 line of dialogue and this aquatic fire looking one. The rest of them at least have some lines of dialogue. We get Zestial, a spider overlord who is the oldest of the overlords, and let's see, he's voiced by James Eagleheart, if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope there's not a typo in there somewhere. I really got to vet these a little bit more just to make sure, especially when I'm doing them all back to back like this. He does a great job as Zestial. You can really feel the age, and with it the strain and weight that comes with being an overlord in Hell in his delivery. And of course you can definitely see that he and Alistair have known each other for a while, and while they're not friends, they at least have a little bit of a grudging respect for one another, and they have a little tete-a-tete back and forth as they're walking down the street. They get to the meeting, and of course it is called by Carmilla Carmine, voiced by Daphne Rubin Vega, who I love her delivery, especially love how she rolls her words sometimes, like how she says brutal. Just the way she rolls it really has a Spanish inflection there. She's explaining like how many people were killed in the latest extermination, how bad it's going to be for all the souls that they hold power of since they're coming down twice. And of course, Velvet is the one who shows up representing the V's, and this is where we really see her late millennial Gen Z self coming in, where she's on the phone talking with her compatriots and really showing disrespect to Carmilla. And as they're getting ready for the meeting, she throws the angel's head on the desk. She acquired it. And the way everyone reacts is how you would expect it, where Alistair's like, ooh, since considering he's a cannibal and we've already seen him eating deer at this point, it makes sense that he would react like that. He's like, ooh, interesting. And everyone else is like, But the way Carmilla reacts, this is the foreshadowing for what we find out after the meeting, that she knows more than what she's saying. And she's like, where'd you get this? Oh, I found it on Extermination Day. And Velvet brings up the point that everyone who sees this is going to be thinking too, if you were in hell, and that is, if these things can be killed, that means we can fight back. We don't have to worry about this. But of course, that brings the added danger of, like, if we fight back in a way that we haven't before, this could mean that heaven could really send down a bigger fist to try to crush this resilience. I mean, think about it. They tossed out Lucifer just for the little, in the grand scheme of things, thing he did with the apple and the creation of sin. If we fought back, they would really come to try to stomp us down. And this leads, of course, into the song Respectless, where Velvet is really trying to get everyone rallied on her side. Zestiol and Carmilla are really trying to fight the thing down and push it back down, being like, yeah, we don't really have any proof this was killed by one of us. It could have been an accident from the angels. Keep that in mind for a later episode. It could have been anything. Doesn't mean that one of us did it. And of course, Velvet keeps being disrespectful, which leads to Carmilla starting the song with, you better show some respect. And this is mainly a vocal tete-a-tete between Carmilla and Velvet. I mean, Zestiol has a couple lines in there too, where he's like, we can't act without more intelligence, which makes sense, especially with how long he's been there. There's a reason he's the oldest surviving overlord. He knows when to act and when to think. He's methodical that way. Something you can respect in a leader, given this type of situation. Now Velvet really wants to push it forward, and she's pointing out stuff like, Carmilla, you are a weapons dealer. This is what you live for. You live for this type of warhawk stuff. And yet, when it comes to it, you really don't want to go that way? I wonder why. Because you seem to react a lot when I brought out the head. I wonder if you know more than you're telling. And of course, once that's brought up by Velvet, which her voice actress, just the way she delivers her singing lines in this song, I just love it. It really shows how sassy she is. The moment that that's brought up, though, Carmilla calls an end to the meeting and storms off. And of course, Alistair, at the end with his little thing, that was a productive meeting. I love the way Amir just says that. There's a little bit of dryness there, but there's a little bit of that cutesy humor that Alistair has there. It's a nice little balance of it. And of course, Carmilla, Zestiol, and Carmilla's daughters leave, and Alistair sends the egg boy to be a spy. And this is where we kind of lead into the second song, but I'm going to circle back to the other part of the plot and then connect them at that point. Now, the other part of the plot following Alistair taking the egg boys is Charlie trying to get the hotel's patrons to bond with some trust exercises. They're going to do the fall trust thing, where they each say something and then they fall. And this is more than just Serpentius and Angel Dust. This includes everybody in the hotel. And from the character interactions we've seen thus far, you can kind of guess where this is going to go. Or Angel Dust is really poking at Husk, trying to get him to react. This is where we get that line. I like to suck. If you say dicks, popsicles, you sicko. And dicks too. And of course, find out a little bit more about Nifty, where we see that she kind of has a thing for pain. Where she keeps jumping off the stage intentionally because nobody caught her the first time. Which I'm surprised Charlie didn't try to catch her. That's the one thing I'm like, watching this, I'm like, really? Even Charlie was that weirded out? That must be something, considering she grew up in hell. And she keeps jumping off and on, which this is where you start to really scratch your head and wonder what is actually going on with Nifty. Now, this is a good first attempt, but you can see the trust exercise not really working the way it should be. So they decide to go someplace Angel recommends, and it turns out to be a I'm probably going to mess up the accurate. It's a bondage dungeon type place. And Vaggie reacts the way you would expect her to react. Like, really? This is how we're supposed to be going. Hey, these guys know what they're doing. And everyone kind of is enjoying it in their own way. Like, Husk is liking it because they're getting the kinks out of his back, which, considering he died older, would make sense. Nifty enjoys it because she really gets into it with the whole outfit and the whip. Because she's like, I'm going to punish some bad boys. I love the way Kimiko does that thing, and of course that weirds Husk out. But instead, after all this, Vaggie thinks about it for a moment and is like, you know what? We really need to do this through trust, but we're going to do it in a way that makes more sense. We're going to do it the way I was taught. And they go to a part of hell that is really, really unsafe because it has a lot of street fighting going along. She's like, this is how we're doing it. And they're like, this is how you were taught? There are no greater bonds created than those created between brothers in arms on the battlefield. Nice little foreshadowing that Vaggie was a military person, considering what we're going to find out about her in a couple episodes' time. So it's a nice way to foreshadow that. And of course, everybody gets kicked off the roof into the battlefield. Now, if there's any little nitpick with this, is that we never see what all of them do. I mean, when they get back on the roof, Angel, Serpentius, Husk, they all talk about what they did down there. So it's one of those things that, like, yeah, it kind of sucks we don't get to see it. But you could also go in the direction that them just talking about it and what little sounds you hear in the background is stronger than anything they could have actually shown. You know, the whole theater or the mind thing, that how they got through that is stronger than anything. But to kind of go with it with the first one, considering the whole show is only 8 episodes, this is one of the things that, like, yeah, maybe they could have extended it in an episode or two and then actually shown this, maybe in a flashback. But for the amount of episodes we got, I don't mind the theater or the mind thing. It actually does show that even if most of it's off screen, that they are starting to bond here, and we're only 3 episodes in at this point. So that shows that even though Charlie's idea does go a little bit towards the hopeless angle, there is something to it. You just got to approach it with these people from the right direction. Maybe you can get them to be redeemed. So it's not entirely hopeless. Now, when it looks like it is going to be hopeless with this exercise, Vaggie, and this is because of her conversation with Charlie through all of this, which is a nice little moment between the two of them. Vaggie decides she needs a moment, and of course, as this is going on, we tie back over to the other one where the egg boy is spying on them. Zestiel notices that there's something wrong with Carmilla, so he does what any good friend would do, and that is what weighs on your soul, old friend, and brings up that, hey, if you are the one that killed the angel, just like Velvet brought up, why don't you let everybody know your strength? Carmilla, through song, brings up that even though she's an overlord, she's in hell and all that, she wanted to try and keep blood off her hands, but when the angel was going to attack those dearest to her, her daughters, she had to do something, so she acted and protected them. But if that got out, there would be a giant war, and she doesn't want that. And this, of course, is her half of whatever it takes, is that she'll keep it closed and protect those she cares about. Then, of course, it cuts over to Carmilla, and she's going off with some similar emotions from her perspective about how she'll be there to protect and lift up Charlie, being her partner and all that. And this is where I like the little difference in how her voice actress does it, where she has a little bit more gruffer sounding vocals like she did on the cop show, and then her singing vocals are a bit lighter, kind of like how she did in Encanto. So we get that little dichotomy there. Now, from a character standpoint, I guess you could say that she tries to keep that gruff exterior in front of everybody else, but then when she's singing, she lets that more sensual side of her personality come out. And it's this contrasting thing between Carmilla and Vaggie and the lyrics and the melody. This is why I feel I slept on this song at first, but then when I started re-listening to it, it hit me right in the feels. Maybe it was because by that point I had watched the rest of this show, so I had a little bit more context with it, and I'm just listening to it, I'm like, oh my god, this is a banger. I can't believe I slept on this song. That's one thing I need to stop doing with some of these episodes, especially when the next season comes out, is actually listen to them all. Maybe rewind and re-watch again before I give full judgment. Because who knows, maybe the title track of the 6th episode might actually hit me a bit better this time. But this song really does sell this whole 3rd act and kind of sets up a little bit more what's going to be going on later, both with the character interactions and also why these characters are making the decisions they're making. Or it's Vaggie and Charlie reunite. They have another little tender moment that it kind of had a little bit of a tiff earlier, but now they're back on the same page, especially with everything going well between the patrons of the hotel following their trust exercise down on the battlefield. Once he's done spying, Egg Boy tells Alistair what he saw and what he heard, and Alistair's like, interesting. Let's keep this between us. Well, Vaggie allows Serpentius to get his Egg Boys back, and that night he's tucking them in and asking how their day went, and the spy mentions what he heard, and he's like, I was not supposed to tell you that. And of course, Serpentius ignores that, which, this is one of the big what-ifs of the whole story. What if Serpentius had believed them and told the rest of those people at the hotel? How would things have gone throughout the rest of it? Because as is, he doesn't find out until later. Which, regardless of the what-if, this leads to one of the most memed moments in the whole show, which I'll bring up once we get to that episode. It's a moment even me and my Serpentius cosplay have done an audio of it over on my TikTok, and I think I put that one up on this page already if you haven't seen it. Of course, it's in my general Pentius cosplay, not my normal Sir one, but it's what I wore to that convention when I did it. That's really all there is to mention for this one. Now we're seeing the Hell fallout, a little bit more from what happened and why Adam, even though he is a major dick, is kind of right to worry about what could happen now that Hell knows that the angels are vulnerable. Of course, now we're going to go on to episode 4, which this is going to be the one where we learned a little bit more about angel dust. So all those things I mentioned to keep in mind in the last episode, bring them to your forefront when we get to the next episode, especially if you're only watching these in the order I'm reviewing them. If you've seen it already, you know what I'm talking about. The next, of course, is going to be Masquerade. Till then, everybody.